Hello, everyone. Welcome to the online Open Campus 2021 at Akita International University. I'm a faculty member at the Global Business Program, and today I'm going to give you a taste of how does a typical global business course look like. So today our topic is the market forces of supply and demand. Due to the limit of time, we're going to focus on the side of demand. So first, let's check how well do you know about economics. Is this statement true or false? Economics is best defined as the study of how to run a business most profitably. Let me give you a few seconds to think about it. Is this statement true or false? Okay, what do you think? The correct answer is false. This is not the definition of economics. What about the other statement? Economics is the study of how society manages its scarce resources. Again, let me give you a few seconds to think about it. Is this statement true or false? This statement is true. So as an economist, what do we usually study? We study lots of things, of course. For example, how people decide what to buy, how much to save, and then how much to spend. Also, regarding companies, we study how firms decide how much to produce, how many workers to hire. Also, if we think about the government or the society as a whole, we study how society decides how to divide its resources between, for example, national defense, protecting the environment, and other needs of the society as a whole. So those are the study of economics. In general, economics is the study of how society manages its scarce resources, because we know that all resources in the society is limited. That's why they're called scarce. So, as we mentioned, due to the limit of time, we're going to focus on the market forces of demand today. First, what factors affect buyers' demand for goods? Normally, we're all considered as consumers. We go to the supermarket to buy some meat, vegetable, food. We also go to the department stores or malls to buy clothing and other things. So we're consumers. Consumers are also known as buyers. So what factors affect buyers' demand for goods? Please keep this question in mind while we go through today's material. First, we need to know, how do we define a market? By definition, market is a group of buyers and sellers of a particular good or service. So that's the definition of the market. So we can see that in the market, we have two groups of people, buyers and sellers. Buyers as a group determine the demand for the product. The product, of course, can be a good or a service. Sellers, similarly, as a group, determine the supply of the product. Similarly, the product could be a good or a service. So today, since we're going to focus on demand, basically we're looking from the perspective of buyers. Also, we have different markets defined in economics. For example, we have competitive market. Here's the definition. In a competitive market, we have many buyers and many sellers. Each of them has a negligible impact on market price, which means that basically the buyers and sellers cannot have an impact or cannot influence the market price of the product. Even though they have some impact, but the impact is too tiny so that basically we can ignore the impact. A step further, we have a perfectly competitive market. So in this kind of market, all goods are exactly the same. In addition, buyers and sellers are so numerous, not just many buyers and many sellers. They're so numerous that no one can affect the market price at all. And in this case, those buyers and sellers are known as price takers because they have no effect on the market price at all. They cannot make the price. They can just take whatever the price is given. Do you think it's realistic to have a perfectly competitive market in your daily life? Probably no, right? Because in reality, we see that most goods come in lots of different varieties. They're not exactly the same. If you think about ice cream we go with different flavors like strawberry, vanilla, chocolate, milk. They're not exactly the same. And also ice cream, we have gelato, which is thicker, and we have soft cream, which is thinner. So the textures are also not the same. So you can see that in reality, we don't see all goods being exactly the same. Also, in reality, many markets where the number of firms is small enough. In this case, some of those firms have the ability to affect the market price, which means those firms are not price takers anymore, they're price makers. For example, if you think about the oil market, we don't have lots of firms in the oil market. So the firms basically, they can make the price. They're not price takers. So why we still study the perfect competitive market if it's not realistic? Because it has some benefit. For example, first, it makes it easier to learn more realistic but more complicated cases later when you study more in economics. Also, learning about perfectly competitive market can teach us about how basically the world works. So it can give us a big picture of how the world functions. Therefore, from now on, we're going to focus on the case, more specifically supply and demand in perfectly competitive market. Okay, so now let's move on to demand. There are a few terms that we need to talk about before going deeper into the analysis of demand. First, quantity demanded. This is the amount of good that buyers are willing and able to purchase. So pay attention that here we have two properties. First, buyers are willing to purchase. Second, they are able to purchase. So they want and they can. Second, very important, we have the law of demand. And the law of demand says, other things equal, when the price of a good rises, the quantity demanded of the good falls. Remember, quantity demanded is defined over here. On the other hand, when the price of a good falls, the quantity demanded of this good rises. So we can see that according to the law of demand, the relationship between the price of a good and quantity demanded of this good is negatively correlated. Therefore, we can use a simple diagram to show the relationship between price of a good and quantity demanded of the good. We see that when the price of a good rises, quantity demanded of the good will fall. On the other hand, when the price of the good falls, quantity demanded of this good will rise. So the arrow tells you when the number is going to go larger. So when the price rises, it goes from the bottom up. When quantity demanded rises, it goes from left to right. That's the meaning of the arrow. Since we talk about the market, let's also look at the market demand. Market demand is the sum of all individual demands for a good or a service. Because we know that in the market, we have many buyers, or in a perfectly competitive market, we have numerous buyers. So if we want to find the market demand, we need to add each buyer's demand up. That's the sum of all individual demands for a good or service. And we also have the market demand curve. Like we saw earlier in the diagram, this is known as the curve. Market demand curve is the sum of the individual demand curves horizontally. Why we sum it horizontally? Because at each price level, one individual is going to demand a certain amount of this good, and another individual is going to demand another amount of this good. Therefore, when we want to find the market demand curve, we sum horizontally at each price level of a product. What's the total amount of quantity demanded of this good in this market? So here, we want to find the total quantity demanded at any price. We add the individual quantities. Since we see that quantity is on the horizontal axis, that's why we sum it horizontally. Okay, let's look at an example. The market demand curve for lattes. Do you like lattes? And here, this is quite popular in Japan, the 3D latte art. And the character here is the Tonari no Totoro, the animated film by Hayao Miyazaki, very famous from Studio Ghibli. And I think many of you have watched this film before, right? And we know that there are two main characters in this film besides Totoro. We have Mei and Satsuki. So let's think about the case. Suppose Satsuki and Mei are the only two buyers in the market for lattes. Pay attention here. We assume that in this market, we only have two buyers, only two consumers, Mei and Satsuki. And we use QD later to signify the quantity demanded. Okay, let's look at the information. So the price of latte may change, right? It could be free when it's zero, it could be $100 per cup, not dollar, yen per cup, 200 yen per cup, 300 yen per cup, and so on. And here we see the individual quantity demanded of latte from Satsuki and Mei. So how do we understand this table? When latte is completely free of charge, when the price is 0 yen, Satsuki is going to demand 16 cups, while Mei is going to demand 8 cups. Also, if we look at here, when the price of latte is 300 yen per cup, Satsuki is going to demand or buy 10 cups, while Mei is going to buy 5 cups. Continue. If the price of latte continue to increase, when the price goes up to 600 yen per cup, Satsuki is going to buy 4 cups, Mei is going to buy 2 cups. So from this table, we can see that who likes latte more, Satsuki or Mei? Satsuki, right? Why is that? Because at any price of latte, Satsuki is going to buy more latte than Mei does. So since Satsuki and Mei are the only two buyers in the market for lattes, how can we use this information to find the market demand curve for latte? First, we need to find what's the market quantity demanded. How do we find it? Let me give you a few seconds to think about it. Since it's the market quantity demanded, and we only have two buyers in this market, so we sum horizontally when the price of latte is 0 yen, when it's free, then the market demand will be 16 cups plus 8 cups, which give us 24 cups, so on and so forth. So if we want to find the market demand curve, the most important thing is to know the price of latte and the corresponding market quantity demanded. So the first column and the last column will be the most important. That's why we move it here. The first column we saw earlier and the last column. Here we have the market quantity demanded. Now, remember earlier we have the sketch of the relationship between price of the product and quantity demanded of the product. Same here, we're going to use the same sketch. Price of latte, quantity demanded of latte. And here, this curve is known as the market demand curve, so we label it with letter D. If we read it, when the price of latte is 0 yen, when it's free of charge, then the market quantity demanded is 24 cups. So here, price 0, 24 cups. Price is 100 yen per cup, market demand 21 cups. 100 yen, going here, 21 cups. So we draw many points on this curve, and we can use the straight line to connect those points. This gives us the demand curve of the market for lattes. So far, so good. Now we saw that we have the demand curve. What does it show? The demand curve shows how price affects quantity demanded, other things being equal. What does the other things mean? Other things, they're known as the non-price determinants of demand, because we know that price will have some effect on demand, right? But there are other things besides price that will also affect demand. They're known as the non-price determinants of demand. We call them other things. And later we're going to look at what are some examples of other things. Things that determine buyers' demand for a good other than the good's price itself. And if those other things change, what will happen is demand curve will shift. So let's look at those other things, the shifters of demand curve. First, income, very important. And if we want to know the impact about income on demand curve, we need to distinguish two different kinds of goods. We have normal goods and inferior goods. Normal goods, other things constant, and increasing income leads to an increase in demand. This is the definition of normal goods. When you have higher income, you're going to demand more. You're going to buy more of this good. If so, this good is considered a normal good. While inferior good, other things constant, an increase in income leads to a decrease in demand. So when you have higher income, instead of buying more, you're buying fewer of this kind of good. This is a little bit counterintuitive, right? But can you think about some examples of inferior goods? One of the very famous examples is cup noodle. Why is that? If you like instant noodle, then what? If you love instant noodle, you're a fan of instant noodle, then instant noodle could be considered a normal good, because the more income you get, you're going to eat more instant noodle. You can eat it breakfast, lunch, dinner. But for most of us, we're not fan of instant noodle, right? We eat it because it's convenient, it's cheap. Because it's cheap. So when we earn higher income, we will go to a fancy restaurant to eat ramen instead of eating the instant noodle. In this case, the demand of instant noodle will drop when people's income increase. So if you're not a big fan of instant noodle, then to you, very likely instant noodle will be considered an inferior good. Okay, so knowing the difference between normal good and inferior good, let's look at the effect of income on demand for those two different kinds of goods. For normal goods, if your income increases, demand curve will shift to the right because you're going to buy more of this good at the same price. While for inferior goods, when your income increases, you will buy fewer of this good. So demand curve is going to shift to the left. So we can see that depending on the feature of the good, whether the good is considered a normal good or inferior goods, the impact of income on demand for this good will be different. So please specify which kind of good you're talking about in the beginning. Is it a normal good or an inferior good? And this gives us an illustration of how does the shifting of demand curve look like. So the black demand curve is the original one. We use letter D to signify it. And the blue curve is the new curve. We use D prime to simplify it. Here we see that at each price level, for example, when the per cup of latte is 100 yen, originally the market demand is 21 cups. Now it's much more than 21 cups. Over here, we didn't put the number, but you can see that since the arrow is pointing to the right, so the further to the right, the larger number of cups. This means that we have a rightward shift of demand curve. Okay, another shifter could be the price of related goods. And when we talk about the related goods, there are two relationships. One is called substitutes. What does that mean? Two goods are substitutes if an increase in the price of one leads to an increase in the demand for the other. Can you think of some examples? Substitutes is like replacement. Burger King and McDonald's. We know that both of them sell similar products, burger, French fries, right? So if the burger in Burger King becomes more expensive, unless you're a big fan of Burger King, then when you want to have burger, probably you're going to go to McDonald's to buy burger. So demand of burger in McDonald's will increase. That's why we see that burgers in Burger King and McDonald's could be substitutes. Another relationship between two goods is known as complements. How do we define it? Two goods are complements if an increase in the price of one leads to a decrease in the demand for the other. They are complements, they go together instead of replacing each other. Can you think of some examples? So the example I give you here is tennis racket and tennis balls. They usually go together, right? So if the price of a tennis racket increases, then probably people will choose to do other sports when they have leisure time. So they're going to buy fewer tennis rackets. At the same time, they will buy fewer tennis balls. So the demand for tennis balls will also decrease. Price of tennis rackets rise. Demand for tennis balls drop. So we know that tennis balls and tennis rackets, they are known as complements. So far so good. Next, taste. Taste can also be understood as preferences of buyers. Anything that causes a shift in taste toward a good, in favor of a good, will increase or decrease the demand for that good. If now more people are in favor of the good, of course, they're going to demand more, right? So we'll increase demand for that good. If the demand of the good is increased, then demand curve will shift to the right. Can you think of some examples? Tapioca. Now tapioca's heat has started to slow down, but in recent years, previous 1 or 2 years, tapioca was quite popular all over Japan. Means that many people start to shift their taste toward tapioca, which increased the demand for tapioca and shift the demand curve for tapioca to the right. And now, since the heat started to cool down, then the taste changed to other drinks. So the demand for tapioca drops because the taste changes and demand curve will shift to the left. Also, we have the expectations about the future. Expectation, who expect? Buyers expect, because we're talking about demand curve. So buyers could expect an increase in income in the future if they expect that their income will increase in the future, then their current demand will increase. Also, buyers could have an expectation that prices of goods will go up in the future. If so, right now, their current demand will go up. So if you think about 2 years ago in October 2019, when the sales tax in Japan rose from 8% to 10%, what happened? Many people rushed to the store to buy the necessity goods, like toilet paper, for example, right? Because they expect price of those goods will go up after October 2019, after the increase of sales tax, because the zekomi kagaku will rise. So their current demand for those goods goes up. Finally, number of buyers. If the number of buyers increases, then what will happen here? Quantity demanded at each price will increase. If so, demand curve will shift to the right. On the other hand, if the number of buyers decreases, then quantity demanded at each price drops. Demand curve will shift to the right. So here, let's look at a summary. We talk about different variables, right? First, we look at the price of the good itself. Then we look at the other things. For example, income, prices of related goods, tastes, expectations, number of buyers. So what are the effect of changes of those variables on demand curve, more specifically? So if the change is the price of the good itself, then we have a movement along the curve, means that we're going to move up or down the demand curve. However, if the factor changes is one of those other things, demand curve will shift. In other words, demand curve will either shift to the left or to the right. Okay, so due to the time limit, let's do one more question, and that's all for today. If you're interested, welcome to AIU and you'll learn more about it. Again, true or false? Statement, chocolate cake. I think many of you like it. I like it too. Changes in the price of chocolate cake cause the demand curve for chocolate cake to shift. However, changes in income cause a movement along the demand curve for chocolate cake. True or false? The correct answer is false. If we go back to the summary table, we can see that this statement is twisting things, mixing them up. If the price of chocolate cake changes, then we have movement along the demand curve. If it's the income changes of buyers, then demand curve will shift. Okay, so that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you start to feel economics is interesting. Thank you for coming, and I'll see you. Goodbye.